Hello and welcome to BonkTable. Today I'm doing a scenario optimization, not battle report. I don't know what to call this. So anyway, we're going to talk about the scenarios. I'm going to give my opinions and my knowledge on how to play each scenario. I'm not going to really go faction by faction. I'm going to go more so a general overall what you should do and moves you should play. I might talk about some specific builds or stuff you can do depending on what kind of list you brought. If it's like a slow tankier list, similar to like what Dwegholm tends to play and Old Dominion, compared to like a faster moving list, let's say 100 Kingdoms all cavalry, or a bunch of cavalry, or Wadroon, or even Spires with all their Strix nonsense. So we're going to go through each of the scenarios. I'm going to talk about them and just compile all that data and how I think what some of the general game plans and strategies you can use on each of them. Let's get into it. Let's start with scenario 1, Divide and Conquer. All right, so Divide and Conquer, I'm going to start with just reading out the victory conditions and where your points are, and then I'm going to start drawing all over this sucker. So get 3 BPs destroying an enemy objective marker, 2 for zones, you get an additional 2 if you're seizing 3 or more, you gain 1 if you're seizing more than your opponent, and you gain 2 if you've slain the enemy warlord. This scenario, on this 12-inch line for both players, you have your friendly zones and objective markers. The thing about this is when you're deploying is that the 12-inch objective marker that I'm going to circle in green disrupts some of your movement as you kind of get up the table, because regiments of speed of 5, they can double march right behind. If you have a banner, you'll lip over that because the marker will be subtract 1.25 from the 12-inch line because of how the middle split is, so you will be at 10.75. If you're a 6 march regiment, you'll land on there. So a lot of regiments tend to just shimmy up beside it. The March 5 regiments, I'll just do it in orange, can shimmy up over it, but you got to really be aware of that marker. That marker doesn't really die until the later end of the game just because of how far back it is. So you don't really have to put much, I don't want to say like focus on it. But the big takeaway in part of the scenario that you want to focus on is these 2 neutral zones. And you want to hold both of them. So you're going to be playing in that, those 2 feet by, I don't know, let's say 3 feet down there. Do this in orange. So you really want to focus in on that. You need a way to figure out how to get past your objective so that it is not hindering you and slowing you down. And you want to take over those neutral zones and you want to hold them, because you cannot score, let's circle in the green, your friendly zones. There we go. Once you've secured and locked down these 2 zones, you want to cripple a flank. So let's go with the right side flank, and then you're gonna, after crippling it, send 1 regiment to score one of your opponent's zones. Then you have achieved 3 or more objectives for 2 additional points. You're gonna get 2 VPs for the 2 neutrals and your opponent's 1 for 6, and then 1 more because you're controlling more than your opponent. So you're gonna be scoring 11. At this point, you're in a really solid position. You are defending. Erase a bunch of this. Do it in purple. You're defending this part of the board, hopefully. And so you're keeping a majority of the board safe. At some point you can kind of go in and maybe take your opponent's objective if it's available to you. But the issue with this is that because the enemy zones are so far back on that 12-inch line, you have to punch through and break your opponent. So you're trying to collapse a flank while having control of the neutral objectives. That's the game plan here. Take control of the 2 neutrals, hold them and lock them down, try and force your opponent to fight over them, and then once you collapse a flank, run across, secure one of those zones, score it, win it out. If this is happening to you as the opponent, you want to kind of beeline and rush something over into your opponent's zone that is maybe the weakened flank or the side that's not as strong, and just kind of get in on there, score it. And I don't know, maybe you can run over here and get this objective if you get more stuff in there. Because either what tends to happen is that one opponent gets kind of knocked back to their zones and now has to fight people off or they're going to get scored on. Or, I'll use it in black, the table starts to spin like so. So the red player is kind of hitting this way, scoring 2 zones, and the blue player is kind of hitting this way, scoring 2 zones. I don't mind divide and conquer. I do like that it's spread out of how they've done the zones and the objectives. My problem with the objectives is that they block how you move up the table. And I don't mind the back-end zones because you have the 2 neutral ones in the middle to fight over, and it's kind of like once you break away and win that fight in the middle, you take over one of the zones. You know, we'll do it in blue here. And you score that out to win, getting your 11 points, and you're good. So try that strategy, try that scenario idea, or you know what, even comment how you guys handle these scenarios as I talk through them. Let's get on to scenario number 2. Decline flank. Alright, this one has I want to call them, I don't want to be rude, but I am going to be anyway. I'm going to call them gimmick mechanics. And this is going to be any scenario that has like another weird thing it's doing that you have to keep track of on top of playing the game, on top of scoring the zones and doing all the other stuff. So on Decline Flank, the gimmick mechanic is, at the end of each supremacy phase, the first player chooses one of the 6 zones, then the second player does the same. The second player cannot choose the same objective zone as the first. Until the end of round, players do not gain victory points for seizing these objective zones. So we have our 6 zones. 1 player selects that one, 2 players selects that one. You cannot score off those 2 zones. Boom, bada bing, Bob's your uncle. During the victory phase, players gain 2 VPs for each zone. They gain 2 additional if they're seizing 3 or more, and they gain 1 additional if they're seizing all the zones. So you can score 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, all in one. Because remember, there's going to be 2 zones that are locked down that prevent you from scoring. So, what is my strategy when I'm presented with this scenario? I tend to use my gimmick mechanic to turn off a zone that my opponent is either has a strong foothold on. So let's say they are playing Dwagholm or Old Dominion. They've established their castle here. And you know what? Let's do it here. There we go. There we go. Much better. So they established their castle there. I will use my gimmick mechanic to turn off, let's say, that zone. So now they're not going to score there, but they have stuff in there, and I can go run around and, let's say, try and take other zones and go from there. My opponent tends to do the same, taking a zone. Sometimes early on, I will preemptively use the gimmick mechanic to turn off, let's say, a far zone. So over here, if they are focusing on this, to try and dissuade them from putting stuff there so that they have focusing their forces on that 2/3 part, that I can then kind of surround and hold them back as I score out, let's say, the other 2 zones and try and fight them. This is all about zone control. This is all about breaking through. That's kind of how I tend to use the gimmick mechanic. If I know that my opponent makes a play for this zone, is probably going to get it this turn, I might just shut that zone off if I have, let's say, 1 stand here and they're sending a full regiment at me and they're going to kill that stand and take that zone. I might just turn it off in advance so that it's kind of a waste of their time to try and score it out. But they need to kind of take it anyway for the future turns, so... And I know I'm not going to be able to take it, and if your opponent has less stuff, you can just kind of take over the table. But I've done that before. But in this scenario, my overall game plan is... I tend to try and seize 2 of these scenarios, or 2 of these objectives closest to me. So it's either going to be these 2, or I'll do it in orange. These 2. Then I set up my wall, and then from there, I'm trying to punch through and take a 3rd zone at some point. Once I have established 3, I'll do it in black. Yeah, once I establish 3, I just kind of hunker and hold that down. I'm using the gimmick mechanic to turn off one of their zones. They're going to turn off one of mine. But now I have control of 3, and I punch across to try and go for 4. At this point, you've kind of windshield wiper, collapse them, and score some points. Another strategy, this is more for faster armies, and if you can spread out, so this will be like 100k all the horses list. You can get up on zones pretty quick because this line right here to touch the tangent is 15 inches. So with Household Knights and a banner and sealed temples and such, you can figure it out with other factions how you're going to do this, or like Strix with Biomancer. That's another fun one. We'll talk about that a little bit, but you can get your Household Knights just touching the zone. You get these guys touching this zone. You can get a Sealed Temple marching in from the side, touching this zone, or even just running up and wheeling on. So you got 1, 2, 3. And because your mounted squires are, let's say, are aggressively positioned, you know, they're going to run up and they're going to be like 18 inches up the table, 19 inches up the table, so they're going to be here. Then turn 2, they're going to be here. So turn 3, if your opponent's like being scared off, this happens a couple times, you can like bring in from the side Sealed Temple and try and get on a zone. It kind of works better on the left side because they don't have to go that far. And that's a nice way to just kind of sneak in and steal a bunch of points really fast. Because now you have 4 zones. One of them's being locked down. You're locking down your opponents. They're only scoring 1, 2, or 3. You're getting a bunch of points. Your opponent kind of comes on with the rest of their stuff, is kind of pushing at you. And all you do at this point... Oop, wrong line. I'm going to do it in orange, is you just back this off and reposition. Because you have the speed of how quick your army is. You back off from that forward zone. You've got those extra VPs early on. And you reform to then fight them however which way you're going to fight them. Use black to symbol your reform line. And you go from there. But now you have a point advantage. And you can kind of peace trade with your opponent as you still score your regular zones, you having 2 and your opponent having 2. But you've already have a score advantage early on. I've done this before with 100k into Echelon on Decline Flank, and it works pretty well. That's kind of what's going on with Decline Flank. There's also the baseline strategy. I think I talked about it at the beginning of this, is that you just kind of take over. That's half. Go here. 2/3 of the board. And you just say, that's mine. So this hatched area, that's your end goal game plan, is to take over 2/3 of the board. 3 zones to your opponent's 1. You win the game that way. So, a couple strategies there. The climb plank is pretty fluid just because of the gimmick mechanic, and so you gotta be on your toes as you play the game. Let's go to scenario 3. Breakout, breakout. That's a JoJo's reference. Actually, they used Breakout as a song for part 5. There you go. There's your lore of the day. So, this one also has another gimmick mechanic. It's not as bad as Decline Flank and some of the other ones we're gonna get to, but you still have to be aware of it. Players can get 3 VPs for destroying the enemy objective marker. You're going to get 2 VPs for the zone. You're going to get 1 for seizing 2 or more zones. You're going to gain 2 VPs for killing the enemy warlord. At the ends of round 1 through 4, or 9 to 10, you gain 1 VP for seizing the ejector zone close to closer to the side. So 1 to 4 and 9 to 10, you're going to score an additional 1 for those 2 zones. And then, 5 to 8, you're going to score additional points for the middle zone. So here's the thing with Breakout. You can't score the middle until your opponent's objective zone is destroyed. You need to go deal with that. There's a couple trains of thought here on how to deal with this and what to do with this scenario. You tend to gain more points because you're going to gain 1 additional point for the 2 sides if you're controlling both of those. And you gain 2 VPs if you're seizing them. So you're going to get 4 plus 5, 6. And then 7 because you're seizing more than your opponent. While in the middle, you're going to be getting 4. Because you're just going to, when you get the middle is turned on, you're going to get 2 for the zone, 2 for the additional from the gimmick mechanic. But if your opponent's controlling the sides, you're not going to get beyond them because they're going to be getting 5, 2 for each, 1 for having more than you. So right off the bat, you're kind of thinking, why don't I just go? I'm just going to get rid of this and take over these sides. I'm going to take over those, hold them down, and then my opponent can have the middle. I'm going to outscore them. Yeah, you are. In the long run of the game, they also can't score the middle until the objective marker for their opponent is dead, so they have to kill that. They're going to get 3 VPs, what's going to push them on early on. But the issue with this strategy is that you have now split your forces. Your opponent controls the middle, they build a wall one way, and then they go over and kill your split forces with a lot of theirs while holding you off. And you can't score that zone until you kill the objective, and your opponent's already set up there. And at that point, your opponent kills off your forces, locks down both zones, scores 5 points to your 2 or 3, and maybe even 7 because of how the additional points go. They've killed your objective and they're winning that way. And it's not a great idea to split your forces like that either, because it's going to take forever for you to reinforce these guys and support them, because all the other minis are not by, and they also have to deal with this wall that your opponent has set up. So it's a strategy. It kind of works for faster armies or into newer players or players that aren't confident, I find. But what I tend to do here is that I tend to say, once again, I will claim 2/3 of the table. This is just kind of a go-to. Don't worry, this will be said a lot. So 2/3 of the table. I am going to put stuff here to control the zone and put damage into this objective to hopefully kill it. Not as soon as possible, because we're going to talk about these objectives in a little bit. And then also claim this zone. So now I have the 2/3. I'm going to be outscoring my opponent. I just give them this zone, let them put a regiment over there and score it, and then I will push them off from these two. And as they kind of come in to punch me, I'll just push them off because I'm already looking to put the rest of my forces there. If they overcommit and let's say put some more stuff over here, now it's going to take time to swing over and support, but it's not with the rest of the army, and you're in a pretty dominant position. Let's talk about these objectives. So, fun thing about the objectives is that they are... Oh, let's redo that. There we go. Let's fix this. Boom. And everything else looks good. Okay, there we go. The fun thing about these objectives is that I don't believe you can fit a 3-wide regiment off the top of my head in between those objectives. Your regiment width at 3 stands wide is 8 inches. The objectives are sitting on the edges, half and half, in and out of the zone on the edges. And as I've talked about before, the overlap when you split the objective marker is 1.25 inches. And you're on a 9-inch zone, so you're already subtracting 2.5 inches. Takes you down to, what? 6.5 off the top of my head? Yeah, 6.5 inches. So you can't put a 3-wide through that zone. That means you have to put a 2-wide to get through that, or else you're just going to be stuck. So let's just redo our red box. 2-wide. There we go. Perfect square. And then you now have less frontage to hurt whoever's hiding behind them. Factions that want to castle up, drag home, or are more tanky, or you're playing a more tanky build, let's say Old Dominion, or factions that want to hide behind stuff. Spyerson is a great example. They love to hide behind stuff so their guns can get to work. They have very good guns. Like this scenario, because they can use these objective markers to hold off enemy regiments that deploy too wide, and then they must waste activations and turns reforming themselves smaller if they want to get through, or your opponent blunders the regiment and has them 3 wide. I'll use blue. Attacks your friendly objective, gets stuck on it, doesn't kill it, and then you just kind of like hammer them with a bunch of other regiments and attack them and kill them off. With this, you want to use your shooting regiments to weaken your opponent's objective marker down to 1 health. And once you've fought off your opponent's regiments that are coming onto the zone, you know, the guys coming from this zone, the guys coming head off, you just pop that, and then you score the 3 points, and then you sit on the zone, and you score up and you win. And if you're having control of this one, on the left side, you're maintaining the same amount of zones and scoring as your opponent, and after that point, you've destroyed enough of their stuff and broken through that you can secure and maintain and hold the middle objective. You then will, once again, as I talked about before, build a wall, clear out on one side, finish it all off, and then I'll do it in orange, swing around and finish for the end of the game if you even get to turn, if you're not at turn 10 at this point. That's kind of how it plays out. Use those middle objectives for your advantage. Just don't run up and like attack the thing without a plan to kill it. If you're gonna attack an objective with a melee regiment, it has to kill the objective. Always remember that. So it needs to use its impact attacks to deal enough damage and clash attacks to deal enough damage to kill it. Has 3 wounds. So you're either hitting it with a heavy, or you're hitting it with a thing that can impact, trample, and clash all at the same time. Or you're hitting it with some guns and then hitting up the melee stuff. So have a plan to kill objectives, is what I'm saying. Don't just run up Raptor Riders or Mounted Squires or Infernal Automata and do like a wound or two to objective, and now you're stuck on the objective fighting it, and your opponent just kills your regiment and is like, yeah, whatever, that was a free kill. Don't do that. Not smart. But that's Breakout. So let's get on to number 4. Echelon. I don't mind Echelon. My big issue, we'll talk about my big issue, but Echelon doesn't have a gimmick mechanic. It's actually pretty solid. I'm really happy with the tournament packet Echelon because they moved up a lot of the objective zones and objective markers, so they're more relevant. But you will get 3 VPs for killing every objective marker. You'll gain 2 for destroying 2 or more objective zone markers during this round. Oh yeah, we'll talk about that one. That's the gimmick mechanic, but never gets scored. You'll get 2 VPs for each objective zone you're seizing, and you gain additional 2 if you're seizing 2 or more. So this scenario, you have a friendly, we'll circle in red. You got a friendly objective marker way back here on the 6-inch line. You got an enemy one. When I'm playing this, I don't look at those 2. They are so far back, you are never getting to them. They're 6 inches off of deployment. If you are running something super fast to get there, it's not getting there until like turn 3, and by that point your opponent has their army on the table and they can see that coming from a mile away and they are going to kill you. Don't do that. The only time you're ever going to do this is around turn 5 or 6 when you have broken through after the fight for the middle, what we're going to talk about, and you're going to go kill that ejector marker and get those points. But don't start that way. It's not that great. You're just feeding your opponent a free regiment because they're just all by their lonesome. This down here is one of the weirdest parts of scoring in the entire scenario packet. So you kill an ejector marker. Let's say you kill that one. You'll gain 3 points. Sweet. Then let's say you kill this ejector marker, and this is all in the same turn. You'll gain another 3 points. Sweet. So 6. And then you'll score additional 2 for everyone you've destroyed after this point. So then you'll get 8. The problem is that as you and your opponent are deploying, your opponent should be focusing on killing this ejector marker with shooting and melee. You should be focusing on killing this ejector marker with shooting and melee as quickly as possible to score those points, as well as opening up this area to bring in more regiments. I'll do it in orange. Opponent allows you to get lots more maneuverability in and starts to get you into the actual fight, what is looking to take your opponent's neutral objective marker. So that's kind of why you want to kill that thing as quickly as possible. It opens that up, gets your points done, bring a bit of shooting, walk up, shoot, then move, and then get something to charge cash and kill it off. Or shoot it a 3rd time, who cares? Just get it out. You should be able to kill that thing by turn 2 or 3. Make sure your opponent doesn't get those points, because, and that's why this section in green like just never comes up, because once those are dead, the only thing left for you to kill what's an ejector marker is this one over here, and now you can't score it because you have to kill 2 in the same turn. Well, there's only 1 left, so you're not getting it. All right, so after you've killed that ejector marker, what's your next plan? Well, you should also be, while looking to kill that ejector marker, is to secure and score this zone, and then put a line right here to keep your opponent out. It's not very far away. It's a 9-inch on the 18-inch line, so you're 15 off the edge. So you can actually get something pretty quick on there and score it out on turn 2 really quick. And then you can move that thing to where that red line is. Maybe we'll make it orange. This is your blocking line to keep your opponent away from you as you bring on the rest of your forces to support that. I tend to, on this one, solidify this. Kind of 2 strategies. I either solidify that zone, and then I push out to kind of push off my opponent and go for their objective, or send something quick after I've collapsed that flank. Just one thing to go over there and steal that ejector marker. Or I set that line, put something there to hold, and then I deploy the rest of my list over here to shoot up and get onto my opponent's zone as quickly as possible. There's a couple times where I've like Vanguard, Household Guard, and then I've just ran Household Guard another 11 inches onto my opponent's zone to score it out, and then I have like 4 stance there too. So I'm going to score both zones for 2 points each, and then 2 for 6. What puts me ahead? Echelon is all about trying to get that little bit ahead and then staying ahead. And if you can kind of quickly grab it early on, you put your opponent on the back foot really quick, and then they have to fight you off, and then they have to fight and try and take your zone that you've established that wall at. That's what's kind of going on there. If you and your opponent are both doing that, tends to happen is there's a fight like right in the middle along, we'll just do this black line right here, and you're kind of trading points. So you're trading zone points, you're trading marker points, and eventually one of the sides collapse. Let's say it is on the right side here. Let's say this side collapse. You start swinging stuff around, and you send something to kill off this objective. You score those 3 points and you win by 3. Or let's say this side collapse and you just find it's easier to get into the zone, and you score both zones, or you prevent your opponent from scoring for a turn. That's another big one, preventing your opponent from scoring on Echelon, because you're looking for that small advantage to get ahead on Echelon, just because of how tightly packed all the scoring elements are right in the middle. There's my middle box. Because of how tightly packed that all is, either getting ahead in points by 2 or 3 or making your opponent fall behind by 2 or 3 will give you that huge advantage. Eventually, however, what happens is that stuff dies, and then you take that zone, take that objective, and you go from there. But that's usually turn 10. I find these back objective markers start to look juicy around turn 8, and that gives you enough turns to get something over there, do enough damage, and kill it by 10, and go on with your day. Alright, let's go to 5. Alright, here are with Forlorn Hope. It does have a gimmick mechanic, but nothing you gotta super worry about. It's the no reinforcement for the 2 feet, so popping in from the side is not gonna matter. It's all just going straight up the middle. However, the middle is nicely compacted right here, and you're gonna be just fighting over that anyway, and so you just want to fight over those 2 feet and that. Alright, let's talk about it. You get 3 VPs for killing the objective marker, 2 for each zone. You gain an additional 3 for seizing 3 or more, and 2 for every enemy character. What is kind of weird, but also whatever. You get 2 for character. How do I play this? This kind of has one game plan. You want to lock down your 2 zones. You want to put damage on your marker, but not allow your opponent to kind of sneak across and take it cheekily. So you can start, once again, shooting at it and then blowing it up at a time of convenience. But you really want to lock down your first 2. You want to put in what's called a weakened flank. So this is your weak side. All its job is to do is to hold off your opponent from attacking you. And then on your strong flank, you want to burst through and take over your opponent's zone. Then you're going to have... we'll do it in black, screw it. 3 zones to your opponent's 1. You're going to get 2 VPs, so 6, and then additional 3 up to 9. And once you've scored that twice, your opponent doesn't really come back from this, because after they push you off their zone, you have enough points that they're not going to come back for. You don't tend to score your opponent's neutral objective over on closer to them, just because your opponent is also looking to grab that as quickly as possible. What tends to happen throughout the game is that both players tend to trade their objective markers and clear up that middle. I'm not going to talk about, the positioning problems every time, because what is that? It's going to be at... I'm thinking here. That's on the 18-inch line. It's 1.5, so it's like 17. So that one's not bad. You can kind of walk around it and move around it. So that one's actually not bad to position over compared to a lot of other ones. Key things here, though. Do an orange. 18, subtract 4.5 is like 13.5 to this zone. If you're speed 7, you can get on the 9-inch really quick. So you can start scoring that early on turn 2. If you have a light that can score, or something even quicker, you can get onto the 6-inch, so that'll be at the 15-inch line. So something that's speed 7 with a banner or faster can score that. Something that's just speed 7 baseline can get on the 9. So you can actually start scoring these objective zones on turn 2 pretty easily with your mediums that are coming onto you if they're quick enough. A lot of factions have something that's March 7 or March 7 with a banner to get there. So you can do it. And I've kind of already talked about the grind. The flanks, Because there's no reinforcement off the sides, you'll see opponents kind of long bomb something around to try and get around it into your like 6 or 9 inch. Just hold them off and push them away. Keep defending this. Do your push. Get onto their zone. Even if you prevent them from scoring, you're going to get up in points. You're going to win out the game. And you kind of grind them down. That's how I kind of play Forlorn Hope. Let's go to Scenario 6. Here's Scenario 6. Here's Off Balance. Love to see it. We have... Do we have any gimmick mechanics? No. Oh, thank God. So, you get 4 VPs for every objective marker that you've destroyed. You gain 2 VPs for each objective zone you are seizing. You gain additional 1 if you're seizing 2 or more. And you get 2 for killing the Warlord. Can only be scored once per game. Alright. This scenario, I actually focus on this neutral zone. And the reason for that is that I run up, I take that zone, and from this position I can split to kill this marker, or I can split to kill this marker. What will net me 4 to 8 points. I'm also close enough that any reinforcement regiments can hang out by this marker to kind of keep it safe and disillude opponents from kind of coming in and taking it. And then once I've established that, I will tend to put enough over on this side to kind of just bother my opponent and keep them away and kind of push them off. Or if they are also doing heavy fighting on the right side zone, I'll put enough over there to try and punch through and take that zone on the left and score it out. If you can score both zones twice, you're kind of ahead, and if you keep your objective marker safe, you'll kind of score it out and win. It's a bit grindy. This can flip-flop in various ways, but if you score ahead on your opponent on those zones and then trade objective markers or get your opponent's back-end markers, you'll come out ahead. And that's why I focus on the right zone, just because you're closer to the objective markers, while if you focused on the left side zone, let's say you take it, you're only going to easily be getting to one objective marker, and then you have to keep going super far away to get to the other one. And at that point, your opponent can, swivel around and counter you and stop you from getting there. So that's kind of the issues with the left side zone. And that's why you should kind of focus your efforts on that middle zone on the right, just to lock it down and score it. And get those objectives. Okay, let's go to 7. Alright, Melee. This is the go-to for every tournament. This one's actually a really solid scenario, and I do like it a lot. But it also tricks you if you don't understand it properly, so let's talk about that. But let's get to points, and this will reveal why it's a tricky little guy. You get 2 VPs for the 6, you get 3 VPs for the 9, you gain 2 additional VPs if you're seizing 2 or more, you get 2 VPs if you've slain the Warlord, 2 for every character, and 2 for every regiment. Alright, so why is this a tricky scenario, and why is it tricking you? As you've just read, you're gaining a ton of VPs for killing regiments, characters, and Warlord. If you kill the Warlord and their regiment, that's 6 points right there. It's a huge spike in points. The thing about the scenario is you actually gain more points by scoring the zones. Most people have between 8 and 12 card decks. What is 24, or what is it, 8... 16, 20, because we got to count an extra 2 for the Warlord. So 20 to about 26 points just in killing stuff. And if you're playing this, you're going to be trading back and forth with your opponent on various regiments. But the thing that pushes you over to actually win the game are the zones. And what you want to focus on here is you want to quickly score 2 zones kind of as soon as possible. So we got 6 on the 18-inch line with 15 away. So something that can run 15, fluid, March 7 with fluid, March 7 with a banner, any of that stuff. Getting on that zone and locking it down for 2 points is really good. Scoring it out. Getting a light that can score here, or somehow off of fluid formation, wheeling on a regiment and then coming up here and then fluiding onto the zone. That's another way to score it, like looking at Steel Temple, looking at Fenris Beastback, scoring that. That right there gets you 7 points. So now you have a 7-point generator, and you lock that down. And then from here, You make a push to score or stall out this zone. So either you want to prevent your opponent from scoring it, or you want to score it, and then you get into... Once you are... Your opponent is no longer scoring 2 or more, so they're going to lose out on 2 points, and you're going to gain additional 2 points. Once you score these 3 zones to about 2 to 3 turns, your opponent has no real way of catching up, even if they push you off. You're just going to be so far ahead that your opponent can't catch up, and you just grind out the game to win. That is kind of my go-to strategy. I'm actually not looking to kill my opponent's regiments. I'm looking to work and score the zones with melee. You might be thinking it's a kill point scenario. I have to kill everything. Don't focus on that. Focus on the zones. Score out the 6 and the 9 as quickly as possible. Get ahead of your opponent. Tie up their 6. Score their 6 a turn or 2. Get ahead on points. Give them this zone. Make them leave a regiment over there. Let them score it. Your focus is on the 2/3 of the table. Lock it down. Make it yours. If your opponent is spreading across the table to counter you here, that's good. That's in your game plan. If they're spreading their stuff out across all this, you can then start piecemealing up their stuff. You know what? We're going to use... We're piecemealing this, and then swinging the rest of your forces after they've dealt with the problems, setting up that wall, setting up that 2/3, and then just pushing your opponent out, scoring to win. And there you go. It's how I won with a 100k goblin list. It's a scenario focused list. I'm not there to kill my opponent's regiments. I think I had like 1 guy left off in the corner. But because I scored 3 to 4 scenario elements just due to the sheer weight of regiments I had on the table, my opponent couldn't stop me from getting so far ahead on scoring. This is a scenario that you got to focus on the zones. The killing is secondary. That's all the other bonus points that you just count at the end of the turn. All right, let's go to 8. Bulwark. All right, this guy's super fun. We got a bit of a gimmick mechanic at the end of round 3, 5, 7, 9. Players gain 2 VPs for the side, seizing the left. And if you're at 2, 4, 6, 8, you get 2 VPs for seizing the right. So you get 3 for killing the ejector marker. You get 3 for killing the center ejector marker. You get 3 for your opponent, 3 for the center. Sweet. You gain 2 for the zone. You get 1 additional if you're using 2 or more. And you get 2 for the enemy warlord. And then at the ends of rounds, you flip-flop. So odds over on the left side. That's right. And 2 additional seizing the left. Yeah, so we get odds over here. And then we get even over here. Sweet. Okay. How do I tend to focus on this? There's 2 thoughts of play here. You will either make a beeline for your opponent's zone, kill their ejector marker, seize their zone, and then swing around and kill this neutral ejector marker, and then basically stonewall them at this point. That neutral ejector marker is really important, because if you and your opponent are trading back and forth between doing the same plan, whoever kills that neutral ejector marker will tend to win because they are up on points and they can play more relaxed and get into better positions and don't have to make as aggressive plays to bust through and get across the table. This is actually quite a bit of distance. It's just over 2 feet from you to get to one zone to the other. So it's going to take you at least 2 to 3 turns to get over there, depending on the speed of the regiment. So killing your opponent's objective zone, locking that down, getting those points, it's not a bad play. The other one, the other form of play, is to score your objective because it's not locked out. You don't have to kill that one. Use that objective as a body blocker in your wall. Kill the neutral objective to score that out. And then you just grind that out with a 3-point difference between you and your opponent who's also scoring their zone. That's another way to play it. But basically, that neutral objective matters a lot if you're very close with your opponent at skill level and strategy. Getting that neutral objective down first before your opponent can is going to be really key for you. So you kind of want to focus on that. You want to split. There is the idea of leaving that neutral objective. Sweet. Done that twice now. Ooh. I might not edit this. We'll find out. So the other idea is leaving that neutral objective for your opponent, but coming in and splitting your forces to score this zone and kind of hold it, because your opponent can't score it off of that marker, and you hold that zone and you kind of like hurt them as they try and kill that marker, because if they're fighting you here, they're not scoring any points because they still got to kill that marker, but you're putting pressure on them and they can't leave you alone because you're going to score that zone. So they're not getting anything out of this fight until they kill that marker, and if they start fighting that marker, you're just going to be hitting them. And then you also deploy here to take over their zone and their marker, and now they have to kind of fight you off so that it trades. So are you going to have enough stuff to try to quickly take that zone? And this is for more faster lists. I want to say like Ladroon, Spires, Cav 100k. Those are my examples. I'm just going to keep using them because they're really good. And that's another idea. And you just leave that neutral objective and you try and take over both zones for like a turn or two, and then your opponent pushes you off. Oh, he's purple. You know, he pushes you off here. But you've scored it for 2 turns, got those bonus points. Your opponent's taken that marker. Hopefully at the end of the turns you also scored the bonus objective points. You get ahead and you go from there. Not a ton on Bulwark. It's kind of a static scenario, but that middle matters a lot, even if it's just one little objective. All right, let's go to scenario 9. Okay, scenario 9, Foresight. This one sucks. I'm gonna be real honest with you guys. This one sucks a lot. It has the worst gimmick mechanic in all the scenario packet. If I could take one of the 12 scenarios outside and kind of like put it out to pasture, just shoot in the head, this would be it. This would be my pick. I think Grind Them Down would be second, but not even remotely as close as you would think they were compared to Foresight. Like, god damn, I hate you, Foresight. Alright, so let's get to the gimmick mechanic. This is a bit of a read, and we'll talk about why I dislike this, and then we'll get into the scenario and how to play it. But at the end of each supremacy phase, the first player secretly chooses an objective marker. Okay, there's one problem. Other than the central one. Then the second player does the same. It is possible the second player has chosen the same objective marker as the first. To ensure the selection remains random, put it on a piece of paper, blah, blah, blah. At the start of the victory phase, both players reveal which objective zone they are choosing. Until the end of the round, players do not gain VPs for seizing that objective zone. Should both players choose the same zone, then they are awarded double the points. So for points, you gain 2 VPs for seizing a zone. You gain 2 if you are seizing 2 zones, not including the center, and you gain 1 additional if you're seizing the center. Let's talk about why this sucks. You randomly select, in black, one of these zones at the start after you figure out who's going first, but before drawing the first card. You and your opponent write it down, put it on a piece of paper, whatever. I usually have a spin dial I throw in my card box, and I just leave it off to the side and then pull it out for my opponent. I've done it on a piece of paper, but yeah, we'll get into it more. But so you go from there, and then after the round is done, you reveal before you guys count up the points, and we go, you double it or you don't. What tends to happen is you and your opponent will select one that you and your opponent are looking to score. So if my opponent's looking to score this one that turn, and I'm looking to score this one, you guys won't score any points, and there you go. That's it. My issue with the secret thing is that it shouldn't rely on an honesty mechanic for a game. Like, there have been horror stories and such of people not writing down their numbers, just saying one at the end, not being truthful. There's also times, I know for myself, I just forget about the whole gimmick mechanic, and then it's like, oh, did you pick one? I'm like, no, I didn't pick any of them. Like, guess I miss it. Like, because this is a terrible mechanic to remember. Like, it's a huge gimmick mechanic that you pick at the start of the round and then gotta remember at the end. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm looking to play the game, I'm looking to play the scenario, I'm looking to put my guys on the zone. I'm not looking to, like, turn one thing or off and on. Decline Flank gets away with it because you do it at the supremacy phase. You're not selecting at the supremacy phase and then being reminded of it in the victory phase. It's just really bad, and I rather not have an honesty mechanic in a game. Just have all the information available to me right off the bat. Because there have been stories of players abusing this and abusing the trust of their opponents, and I don't believe that should be in a tournament packet or any scenario design. Alright, how do you play this scenario then, if you gotta work around this mechanic? So the only zone that is safe from this mechanic is the middle zone. And so what I do is I run up the table, and I claim the middle zone as mine, and then I tend to claim this zone as mine, and from there, my opponent is either trying to fight for that middle zone, or punch through into this zone, or they're trying to score this zone. I will then kind of secure and lock down this zone. I'll punch out so that I control 2/3 of the board, because the 2/3 of the board strategy is a really good strategy. Having more zones than your opponent just forces you to score more and have more stuff and points and win the game. There have been a couple times, actually, where my opponent and I are fighting on that side. My opponent's scoring this zone. We're not even looking at locking down or turning stuff off. And I have one regiment that's not really doing anything. They're kind of swinging all their stuff this way from that zone that can be put over there. And I'll just have a side deploy sneak on, and they'll have just a regiment sit on that zone and score it out. And then at that point, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 to their 1. My opponent's fighting me. I'm holding them off. They're turning off this one, or they're turning off this one, and I'm turning off that one, and we're going back and forth. But you really want to secure the middle, because you don't have to interact with the gimmick mechanic of this terrible scenario. If you don't, like, if there's a chance to not play Foresight, don't do it. Don't be like, oh, let's play Foresight. No, just don't. It'll save you so many problems. But if you end up having to play Foresight, this is what you're doing. You want to secure and lock down that middle zone because you don't have to interact with it. There's the gotcha kind of mind game mechanic of the flip-flop. There'll be times where I just throw my turn off of points on like a zone on my end of the table that I'm not scoring, just because I know my opponent won't get over there. And if my opponent was trying to be tricksy with me, let's say I pick 2 and they pick 2 to double up the points, now they just can't. So I really try to not interact with this mechanic at all, because I'm not trying to give my opponent free points if they're trying to play my games, but I'm also trying to not shut myself down if I'm not over there. That's really all I got for Foresight. Just control the middle and take over 2/3 of the board. You'll be fine. Let's go. I don't even know what the next scenario is. 9? Jesus. 10? 10. This poor thing. Poor Foresight. Get out of here, Foresight. Let's go to 10. Okay, so scenario 10. We have head-to-head. And actually another pretty good scenario. For points, this one does not have a gimmick mechanic. Thank you. So for points, 3 VPs for scoring the 9er. You get 4 VPs for scoring your opponents, and your opponent gets 4 for scoring you. You cannot score the 6-inch, your friendly 6-inch. You gain 2 VPs for killing the Warlord. Cannot be scored more than once. This is not on melee. Parabellum designers put this on melee. I don't know why it's not on melee. Then you get 2 VPs for every character and every regiment. So this is another kill point scenario. This is the second one in the packet. There's only 2. But once again, it's not a kill point. Like, you're not focusing on kill points. That's the puzzle. That's the trick. You know, that's what Parabellum's trying to trick you with. You are looking to shoot up and secure this 9. You need to secure this 9-inch zone at the earliest possibility, and then for the rest of the game. That is your main goal. Once you control that 9 and start scoring 3 VPs, you'll be in a very good spot. After that, you will have a weakened flank. So you're going to put something on your friendly zone to disillude your opponent from just shooting up something quick, let's say Fenris Beast Pack, House of Knights, whatever, to get in that zone and take it from you and score it. If you are losing the 9, you want to stall out your opponent on the 9 if they're trying to take it. And then you need to make a play with just enough forces. And I mean just enough. So if your opponent has 1 regiment in the friendly objective, you need to commit 2. If they have 2, you need to commit 3. And you just need to put just enough. You can't overcommit to the friendly objective side of the table. Like, this scenario is basically split in half like this. You can't commit too many resources to that side because you still need to have resources, and what I mean by resources is your regiment, to contest and score and fight off your opponent on the 9-inch side. And you want to win that 9, but if it's stalling out, make the play for your opponent's side. So let's say you have 2 regiments to your opponent's 1, move them up the table, make them run side by side, put that pressure on your opponent, and force them to kind of stick their neck out, get that charge in there, kill them off, get that regiment in there, score that zone, put that work in. You can't just sit and hide on your zone. So I see a lot of players will just, they'll put a regiment here. They'll put a regiment here. They got their 2 regiments, protecting those zones, good. And then they start to lose the 9, and their opponent scores the 9. At that point, at that turn, they need to make the conscious decision to start deploying these guys up this table. You need to start doing it a little earlier than you might want to. Get those guys in a position to start threatening your opponent's 6 so that you can take it. So, right now they've lost the 9. They're at this position right here. Charge in, kill this, score the 6, and now you're balancing the points again in your favor because you have the 4. The issue with this is that your opponent should have some regiments around, should be counter-deploying enough to hold you off. They should lock down the 9, win that fight, and then swing over this way to either score your 6 or to reinforce and push off their 6. That's kind of how it plays, but you need to focus in on that 9. And you need to protect your 6 with a weakened flank. And that's how you play head-to-head. Here we are! Maelstrom! Ben from Competent Conquest thought this was the best scenario for quite a while. I didn't like it for quite a while, especially back in 1.51, just because I thought it was kind of bland and kind of stupid how it flip-flops. I've come around on Maelstrom a lot more than I used to, and this one follows Breakout and kind of how you play it. So, it does have a bit of a gimmick mechanic. It's not as bad as Foresight. Holy crap, please take that one up back and shoot in the face. If I had 2 bullets and I was out with grind them down, Foresight, and decline flank, I'd shoot Foresight twice and then beat it with the pistol. That's how bad I hate that scenario. But, Maelstrom. You get... Oh, this is also, I think, the only scenario. There might be another one, but for sure this one. You can score the objectives on turn 1 instead of turn 2 like normal. That's a big theme that comes up. There is a couple factions that can get on to the objective zones and score it. The big one off the top of my head is Spires, because they can run Strix up 20 inches, touch that 9er because it's on the 24 mark, and then that 9-inch zone is 4.5 inches back. And then they have the Biomancer, who is on the table somewhere, who casts Biomancy to score, and you get points right off the bat. So, be aware of that. If your opponent is playing Strix and Biomancer and a Biomancer Warlord, they will score on Maelstrom early and often. But, at the ends of round 1 and 4, you gain VPs as following, and 9 and 10. You get 2 for the 6 and 1 for the 9s, and at turns 5 to 8, you will score 1 from the 6 and 2 for the 9s. So, this scenario, baseline, you kind of want to just take over 2 zones. That's really it. Just go and take over 2 zones, flip-flop and score the extra points, get to turn 10, that's all it is. There is the other idea of taking over both the flanks and giving your opponent the middle. You will outscore your opponent this way, just because of those 2 zones and the bonuses, and as they flip-flop, because you will be gaining the flanks at turns 5 and 8 when people are finally getting on the zones and holding them down and locking them down. You'll kind of gain more points. The only issue with this is if you're making for that play is that you've given up the center, what allows your opponent to crush, here, red, crush and dominate a flank. So you really want to be careful about that one. And that kind of leads back to the optimal play of just taking over, bad line, 2/3 of the table and saying, this is mine, please go away. That's really it with Maelstrom. Like, the 2/3 idea is probably the best generalist strategy for all these scenarios as you play them and as you go for them. That's really it. Let's go to grind them down. Here's scenario 12. Good old grind them down. I do not like you compared to other ones. So, Foresight, way worse. Grind them down. A little bit of love, but it also has a gimmick mechanic that I'm not a huge fan of. But I kind of want to see them change grind them down. I've talked to Ben during the Ben Power Hour podcast episode what he would do to change this, and I do agree with his quick computer chair game design. So let's get on to the gimmick and then we'll get on to scenario. At the end of each supremacy phase, the first player chooses one of the 6s that has no friendly regiment in range of it. Then the second player does the same. It's possible to have the same objective zone. Players gain additional 3 VCs if they have seized that zone at the end of the round's victory phase. So, let's say I'm going to pick this 6-inch on my supremacy phase. I need to have no regiments in it. And then I need to get, at some point in the turn, I need to get that regiment in there to score those additional 3 points. You get 1 VP for seizing any of the zones, and you get an additional 2 for your seizing 2 or more zones. This one has a similar thing, where you kind of have the 2/3 going on. But also you want to start doing what's called the score generator. And that's where you will take over 2 zones, and you're going to rotate 1 or 2 regiments between the 2. So you can do this in 2 different ways. This is the first optimal way, and it requires you battling your opponent off a zone and then crushing a flank and then dominating the side. You will then take a regiment. You only need 2 stands of a regiment left, and they can corner tip from like this corner and this corner to touch a zone. And you just kind of reform back and forth. So let me just undo a bunch of that just to clear it up. So you'll get both zones, you will march up, get here, but not be on the other one, scoring that zone. Yay! And then next turn, you will reform again, touching this one, but not the other one, scoring that zone, and you'll just score 4 points a turn off of those 2 zones for the rest of the game. And you just can kind of maintain control of that. That usually also leads into you taking over, once again, 2/3 of the board, locking down this middle zone, what doesn't have the gimmick mechanic, and you hold that off, and with those additional points off of scoring 2 or more zones, you'll outscore your opponent, even if they are doing the same thing over here on a score generator, because you control the middle. So 2/3 of the table, pretty good. The next thing you can do is you split it kind of down the middle. This requires 2 regiments, where you're having 1 regiment score this zone for 4, and then this regiment is off this zone, looking to score it next turn, and then you have them like this guy comes off, this guy goes on, and you just kind of go back and forth while fighting off your opponent. That's another way to do it. It's not as easy, and also you're spending resources of 2 regiments instead of 1 to score that, so you kind of really want to, as you're playing this, you want to make a big push on one side to claim your opponent's closer 6-inch so you can start that generator. You want to take over the middle, and then you want to just hold on to this 6 to prevent your opponent from starting their own score generator. And once you achieve that, you're just going to outscore your opponent and win the game. And that's kind of how grind them down tends to work. If you have 2 closely skilled opponents, this kind of rotates down the middle. So let's say the red player is going to be taking over this, generating points. Blue player is going to be taking over this, generating points. And then they kind of fight over the middle to see who's going to seize the middle to get that extra bit of points to push yourself over the edge and outscore your opponent for the win. And there we go. That's kind of my strategies I use in Scenario Talk for all the scenarios. I hope you enjoyed yourself today, and I hope you guys have a good one. If you're looking for more BonkTable content, there's stuff on the YouTube channel. You can like and subscribe to that, and you can also check out the podcast or bother my wonderful co-host Cassandra on her Twitter, what's in the description below. Or if you want to talk to me more directly, the BonkTable Discord's open. You can join that. All right, have a great day. Bye.